Praise Jesus Christ. I just finished Kingdom Come Deliverance for the very first time, which means it's time to sit down and give my full, spoiler-free review of the game. My name is James, and I started this channel simply because I love video games. If that sounds like you, please subscribe to my channel so that you can see more videos just like this one. As I already said, this was my very first time playing Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I played 2 hours of the game in December and then didn't touch it again until early February. I played the PS4 version of the game on PS5, and I played about 80 hours over the course of 3 weeks. And for the most part, I didn't really want to commit to doing all of the side stuff or only the main story, so really each time I sat down to play, I just decided to go and do whatever felt right in the moment. And for Acts 1 and 2, that ended up with me doing a whole bunch of side stuff and doing a whole lot of exploration and meeting a ton of characters. But by the time I got to Act 3, I was pretty focused on the main story. And with all of that out of the way, let's get started with the positives. The biggest positive for me, and the very first thing that I wrote down, is the story and the characters. The overarching story itself isn't anything too groundbreaking. You play as Henry, and in the beginning of the game, he experiences a tragedy, and then most of the game is Henry trying to cope with the tragedy and better himself. However, where the story really shines, I think, is in the role-playing that you're given the ability to do. The different decisions that you're able to make as Henry make every single playthrough completely different. The way that I play the game is going to be different than the way that you play the game, which is going to be different than the way that a third person plays the game. And you can confidently know that your version of Henry really is unique to just your playthrough, and that kind of stuff is really interesting to talk about as well. In a way, the game actually just turns into one giant sandbox, in that if you are in a situation and you think like, I wonder if I could do whatever, there's a pretty good chance that you might actually be able to do it. For example, I got arrested by a guard. I was caught pickpocketing, and he took all of the items that I had taken from other people. Anything that was in my inventory that was marked as stolen, he took it. I followed him around a little bit, and I waited till nobody else was watching, and then I was actually able to pickpocket all of those items off of him again, and then I ran out of town so that he couldn't find me. Another example is that I was trying to take over this bandit camp, and when I would run in there, all of a sudden, all these bandits would start attacking me all at once, and I wasn't able to handle my own and combat that early in the game. But what I ended up doing was I went nearby and I waited for it to be nighttime so that there was only one guard awake. The rest of them were going to be sleeping. And when bandits are sleeping, they take off their armor and they put their weapons away too. So I was able to sneak around the bandit camp in the dead of night and silently kill all of the sleeping bandits, and then the patrol bandit that had this big sword and shield, I was able to actually fight him one-on-one, which levels the playing field a lot. And those kind of interactions make it feel like you really are a part of this world, and it feels like your actions carry much more weight. And then kind of in the same ballpark is that this is probably the most immersive game that I've ever played. I already talked about just kind of wondering if you can do something and it probably being able to work out. That also goes as far to the way that you interact and talk to other characters and agreements that you make with other characters as well. The entire game, you're going to be making like verbal agreements with these NPCs, and you might agree with your friend John to go, I don't know, rob a store together in the middle of night and then split the money. But then after you've unlocked the store and taken all the money, you might just decide to go ahead and kill John and take all the money for yourself. And that might cause your side quest or whatever to say like mission failed or something, but it's not gonna like reset your progress or anything like that. And another thing that really added to the immersion for me was that outside of dying and resetting and manually loading a save, nothing is going to reset your progress. That unless I'm forgetting something, there was never any sense of you failed this objective, so you're being set back in time to try this objective again or anything like that. No matter what happens in your story, you are going to be able to keep pressing forward, and I found that to be really compelling. All of this is to say that I feel like Warhorse did a really great job of making this game as immersive as possible. In a way, I almost feel like this game is more of a medieval peasant simulator than anything else. You've got to make sure that your clothes are clean, and if you get in a fight, you better go take a shower before trying to go and take out the miller's daughter to dinner, or anything like that. It is incredibly immersive and incredibly deep. Another thing that I want to mention here is the side quests. I thought the way that the side quests were presented to you felt natural, and it didn't feel like they were just kind of like shoehorning them into your quest log or anything like that. All of the quests that I did gave pretty satisfying rewards that made me want to continue doing more quests out in the world. Actually, there was a quest that you're given right at the start of the game that I didn't do just because I kind of blew it off. And I ended up doing it probably about 65 hours into my game, only to find out that the reward for completing that quest is that you're given new saddlebags for your horse that like triples the amount of weight that it can carry, which would have been really helpful to have the entire game. Also related to side quests, they do a really great job of reasonably introducing you to new towns, new areas you've never been to, different factions, different types of characters, and different unique characters as well. But most importantly, what I noticed about the side quests was that every single one of them felt unique. That they didn't feel like they just threw some random names and items into a side quest generator to see what would come out. For the most part, if you find a side quest and kind of describe it to somebody else, they'll know what you're talking about if they've done that quest, because there's probably no other side quests that are quite like that one, which I thought was awesome. And then finally, the last positive that I want to talk about is the dice game. Early on, I kind of just brushed it off as just being some random thing to go do in bars when I felt like killing a couple minutes. Later on in the game, I actually had a really great time with it, and I got good enough with it with my own custom dice that I was able to win hundreds of groschen off people. And where I feel like the dice game stood out, in one area there was some strategy to it as far as choosing your custom dice and understanding what combinations would be more beneficial for you. I've already talked a little bit about the depth of characters and the way that they act and behave, but that's also on full display even in this little dice minigame. You typically play to score 4,000 points, and if you're beating somebody by a lot, let's say that I'm winning by like 2,000, the person that I'm playing against might all of a sudden start making these like really rash decisions because they know that they're kind of in a dire state and they have to be able to, and they have to kind of make these more ballsy decisions in order to have a chance of winning. The inverse side of that is that if you're playing the dice game and you're losing by a whole lot, you'll notice that the other players really don't press their luck very much, and all of a sudden they start playing like really conservative. So they might, if they're winning by over 1,000 points, instead of trying to push it and go ahead by another 1,000 points, they might be more content only taking like 300 or 400 points per turn. And I find that level of detail in the character interactions to be really cool. That's all my positives. So it's time to move into the mixed section. These are things that don't necessarily fit into the positive or the negatives, but there's still things that I want to talk about. The first one is that early game saving can be really frustrating. When you start out the game, you have no skills or anything. You definitely don't have very good armor, and you're probably not very good at combat. So you want to save as often as possible. That's kind of what you'll feel as a player. However, since saving is tied to savior schnapps, you don't really want to save all the time because then you might run out and have to get more. And early on in the game, before you get a couple quests and stuff under your belt, money is kind of hard to come by. In the early game, I found myself in situations where I wanted to save, but I didn't because I would have to use my very last savior schnapps, and I didn't have enough money to go get another one. And also one of the downsides of this is that the longer you go without saving, the more likely you are to randomly die and just lose a whole bunch of progress. Like, you're not gonna just randomly drop dead, but when you're still kind of warming up to the world, there's a lot of things that the first time you interact with them, you might get killed without really thinking about it. Even doing something as simple as fast traveling from one familiar area to another familiar area, you might get ambushed by bandits and get killed on the road. And so saving and knowing when to save and why to save, as well as losing progress, can be pretty frustrating. Another thing is that the game kind of encourages you to change your clothes and change your gear for like different scenarios, but there's so many different gear slots. I think you equip like 20 pieces of gear at a time. Changing out all of them, or even most of them, every time you decide to switch between combat and stealth or anything like that would be rather tedious. I think it would have been better I think it would have been helpful if they would let you either choose a loadout or like group different items together, that it's like, hey, every time I equip this item, like go ahead and automatically equip like this item, and this item, or something like that, which I do think that there's a system similar to that in the second game, but because there wasn't anything like that in this game, the thing that I ended up doing was my basic armor that I kept on was just to maximize defense. And then if I needed to be stealthy, I would pretty much just take off everything so that my noise would be as low as possible. And that's pretty much it. Another mixed thing for me was that I kind of went into this thinking it was going to be more of like an action game, leaning on like the action side of like action RPG, and it's really not. I think I mentioned earlier that it is much more of a like medieval peasant simulator, and I mean that in every sense. And so if you're looking to check out this game, you should probably know ahead of time that it's not an action game. And you can actually do very large chunks of the game without any combat at all. And I actually would have to say that my favorite sections of the game are the ones where I was able to avoid combat. And while I'm talking about combat, another mixed thing for me is that the combat is really hard. They do a great job of making it like realistic and immersive. It's also quite slow paced. And even at your most powerful, you're probably not going to be able to take on more than 2 enemies at a time. And so that kind of lacked It didn't fulfill the power fantasy that you get from a lot of games. And then the final mixed thing that I want to talk about is that the objectives in quests are kind of delivered in an inconsistent way. And what I mean by that is that sometimes a side quest or even a main quest will tell you like exactly what to do, like go to this place, talk to this person, go and do this. But then sometimes you'll be told, oh, go to this area and look for people who know about this thing. Or sometimes you might be told like, oh, this is the problem, find a solution to it. And then you are supposed to go and look for like a specific item or something, and then you come back and talk to a person and then give them whatever the item is. But it doesn't really do a great job of communicating all that to you. And related a little bit to those objectives and to those like kind of inconsistencies there, you can get to a point where you kind of feel like all of your leads are just kind of like dead ends. I had a point when I was playing that you were supposed to go to a town and ask around for like suspicious behavior. And I don't know what I did in this town, but everybody in this town hated me. Like I would go over to I would go up and start talking to someone, and I would be like, "Hello, how are you today?" And they'd be like, "What are you doing here?" And I got to a point where people in this town wouldn't even talk to me unless I gave them like a handful of money, like before the conversation even started. And while I was going around this town talking to people, I literally had people telling me like, "Yeah, I know who you're looking for, but I'm not going to tell you because you suck. Maybe if I liked you more, I would be more helpful." And I don't know what I did to make everybody in this town hate me. And so that was a little bit frustrating. And so that happened to me at the end of Act 2, like kind of around the end of Act 2. And when all that stuff was... because I felt like the story was moving along, and then I got to that section and I was stuck there for a while. And then when that happened, I was kind of feeling like, okay, I'm ready to move on with my life. Like, I would like to play another game sometime soon. But it did end up being okay. I got through it, and I actually don't remember what I did to be able to make anybody in the town like me. Before I give my negatives, if you haven't yet, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2025. So that does bring us to the negatives. And I really don't have a lot to say here. Let's see. The first thing that I wrote down was that this game has a very steep learning curve. It's making you track your character's sleep and your hunger and your how dirty your clothes are, and your armor durability, and food in your inventory might be spoiling, and if you eat spoiled food, it won't heal you or make you less hungry. It'll actually make you sick, and then when you walk around, you might start like swaying and stuff. And there is so much stuff to keep track of that it's very overwhelming for the first few hours that you're playing. The second negative for me is that this game is very demanding of both your time and attention. And what I mean by that is that, well, first off, this game's pretty long, and getting good at the game takes a long time, and if you want to see all the side quests and stuff, which I didn't even do, you're probably looking for about 80 to 100 hours. And additionally, all of the systems and the way this world works and the way the game works as a whole is so deep and so complex that I really wouldn't recommend playing any other games at the same time as this game. And furthermore, as far as it being demanding of your attention, you cannot... when you're playing this game, you need to be paying attention to what characters are saying, even if they don't seem important. You can't be listening to music or watching a TV show or listening to a podcast or anything. When you're playing this game, you've got to be really locked in. And I'm saying this in the negative section of the review, but I don't think if you know that going into the game, I don't really think it's that negative. And then the last negative... This is going to be more of like a rapid fire thing, but I wrote snowballing nitpicks. Number 1, if you are running around at night, you have to carry a torch or you'll get arrested, basically. Or they'll come and like interrogate you, asking you why you're like sneaking around in the dark or something. However, in combat, if you are using a sword and a shield, taking out your torch will unequip your shield, but then putting your torch away doesn't re-equip your shield. And the number of times that I would end up in combat fighting for my life and then realize that I do not have a shield equipped was a lot. Way more than I care to admit. Number 2, bugs. Which some of the bugs were fine. Like, there were some characters that would like... Two NPCs would sit in the same chair and they would like kind of assume the same form, which I don't really think that's big of a deal. Or somebody would be walking around and sweeping and the broom would be invisible or something like that. And I don't think that's a big deal either. The things that bothered me were when I do everything right, I'm fast traveling overnight with a torch out because I don't want to be arrested, and then some random dude in the middle of a town comes up and picks a fight with me. It pulls me out of my fast travel because this guy comes over and starts to fight with me, so I put my torch away and beat him up, and then a guard comes over and arrests me for starting fights with people. I have a hard time believing that my character, like on autopilot while fast traveling, did something to that guy to warrant him starting the fight in the first place. So I don't really know what's going on there. Number 3, one of the DLC packs was the Ratai tournament. The notifications for the tournament are super annoying. It'll start every time. It'll pop up as a side quest. It'll say like, oh, the Ratai tournament starts tomorrow. And then the next day, it'll be like, oh, the Ratai tournament is today. And then it'll say like, oh, go talk to so-and-so to do this for the tournament. And this will happen like, you'll get like 5 or 6 on-screen notifications about it in the span of like an hour. And so I found those to be pretty annoying. And then the final one for me that kind of got annoying at the end of the game was that if you save and exit, you can't go in and stuff isn't going how you want it, or you realize like, I'm about to die, let me go ahead and load my last save. You can't manually load an exit save. You have to actually die in order to get kicked back to it, which I thought was a little annoying. All in all, I really enjoyed my time with Kingdom Come Deliverance. And I would say that if you're on the fence about this game, go ahead and add it to your wish list on PlayStation or Xbox, and then when it goes on sale, you'll get notified for it. I got it on a great sale. I think I paid $3 for the game, and I definitely got my money's worth. And I should probably mention, I am going to play the second game. I'm probably not going to play it right now. I'll probably try to get to it sometime in the fall. I don't think I'm ready for it yet, though. I need a break. I need to unplug for a little bit. That's all that I have to say about Kingdom Come Deliverance. In the comment section, please let me know what you think about this game. And until next time, the best way to keep up with me is on Twitter and on Instagram at James_Solar, and on Blue Sky at jamessolar.bsky.social. Thanks, guys.